Hello again, and welcome to another Kemetic Byte. And it's been a while, hasn't it, guys? Well, I've got a couple of things to talk about this time. We're right in the middle of the Days Upon the Year, which is sort of Egyptian Holy Week. I celebrate it earlier than other traditions, but that's something that we talk about as we go along, in the videos, which hopefully you're catching on live broadcasts, and if not actually with us, then later on. It's really fun to have people from who knows where all coming together, and we're doing our little thing. First of all, though, I want to address something by the request of one of my Patreon peeps, because when I was doing some reviews of other books at the earlier part of the year, including Egyptian paganism, which that particular book was just terrible, and I said, well, if you have to pick something, other than what I've written, as much as I've, harped on some other books, this one, being Circle of Isis, is all right. Well, my Patreon supporter wanted to point out there is a story that the author relates in this book about something that happened in her pagan community. There was a student who was, she says, physically abused, but based on the context, it sounds like this was, sexual abuse or even assault, that went on. This was in the section where she's talking about working with Ra, because, he was very upset that he had not been, called upon when this happened. As she relates this story, she says that they did not go to the authorities because they were afraid that it was going to end up becoming about, paganism and the occult, not about what happened to the student. If the authorities were informed about the incident, the craft would be on trial, not the two people involved. Well, what my viewer wanted to stress, and I agree, is that today that should not be taken as a good example of what to do. If there's sexual abuse that goes on in a coven or other pagan group, then don't let your fear of religious discrimination keep you from calling for help, calling for justice as the situation demands. So in that vein, I did want to talk just for a moment about sexual abuse and misconduct in the pagan community, because it does happen. Now, I'm very fortunate. I never had anything like that happen to me. Of course, what probably helps is the fact that I was firmly attached when I started participating to begin with, so nobody got any stupid ideas. But it's happened to plenty of other people. I've watched local covens be torn apart by sexual misconduct, at the very least. A lot of that seems to come when you have one couple that has an open relationship, and they assume that others do as well, and hurt feelings get hurt, and trust is abused, and it just goes from there, and it's just a vicious spiral. And it's very easy to assume, and especially for outsiders, I'm sure they would point to the very libertine culture that you have in paganism. All acts of love and pleasure, are my rituals. Sexuality is not seen as something negative. But even in other faith traditions, other communities, cultures where, sexuality is, looked upon in a more restrictive manner, you still have the same stuff happen. Catholic Love Boat on South Park, okay? What was that talking about? But, rather than point to, everything else in the world, what I think is more important is to understand that the same dynamic underpins sexual abuse in the pagan community as it does anywhere else. And that is, who has the power to gratify themselves at someone else's expense. To expand on that a little bit, my advice to anyone, but especially to beginners in any kind of pagan, tradition, or even if you're just exploring, keep your autonomy and your locus of control with yourself. That means if someone is offering to teach you, to share with you hidden knowledge, or power, and they ask you, what are you willing to do for it? Set your boundaries and stick to them. Your body should be off limits. Sexual energy is extremely powerful, and for that reason, I advocate that you only explore that with a committed partner, or at the bare minimum, somebody who's equal standing to you. In other words, not older, further along and supposed to be teaching you or something. Let it be. If you're a noob, then you should experiment with another noob. That's short for newbie, for those who didn't catch that. But you should make sure that you're on an even playing field or in a committed relationship, because sexual energy is so potent and so powerful, and it has ramifications in the mundane sphere and not just, spiritually. And this almost goes without saying, but, we need to say it anyway. If you suspect that someone underage is being sexually abused, report it. You're protected by law if you make a good faith report. And if you happen to be in a profession such as a teacher or healthcare worker, that means that you are a mandated reporter. In other words, you can be liable if you don't report it. So, if you see something that's going on, don't think, oh my God, it's going to become a witch hunt, all this other stuff. It's the craft or paganism is going to go on trial. Yeah, there are some places where, if that comes up, it can be, it's still an issue, but people are going to have to get over it. What's more important is that, someone's being abused, and it has to stop. And people need to know that there are pagans out there that do care about consent, fidelity, the age of consent, things like that. Don't do what that author did. Now, it's something to keep in mind. When she was writing this, it probably was sometime in the 70s, and, a lot of things were different back then, and some of us are old enough to kind of remember a little of the satanic panic. Well, guess what? We're past that. So if something's going on, if they've committed a crime, then report it. Now, if not, if it's just a case of, all right, questionable behavior, sitting there trying to, you have someone who's trying to nail all the students in a coven, or someone who habitually sleeps with people who are awfully young, which I have seen, and it's like, okay, they're legal just barely. Stay away from people like that. Those kinds of people, a lot of folks will make excuses for them. And I disagree with that. I say just don't deal with them. Some people should be shunned for doing bad things like that. That's if they haven't done anything that is breaking the law. So that particular topic covered, I did want to point that out. Now I'm going to go on to something that we kind of came across, also discussing the book Egyptian Paganism, and in that book it said that in the Old Kingdom, Set and Neat were a couple. And what's funny is there's another book that I have that's an A to Z of Ancient Egypt that also mentioned that. They both cite the same source, being La Déesse Neat de Sais by Ramadan al-Sayed. It's all in French. It comes in 2 volumes. The first volume, let me see if I got this right. Importance et rayonnement de son culte. The importance and influence of her cult. That's more discussion. The rest of it is just mentioning specific, artifacts and monuments that, and religious texts that mention Neith. But anyway, I went ahead and found the section where it talks about Neith's relationship to different deities, because he goes through a list of them. And I translated it word for word so I could find out, okay, what exactly did he say? This is what's interesting about it. Okay, this is on page 127 of Volume 1, Section 13, Neith and Seth. One finds their names associated in a spell of the pyramid texts. Set and Neat, among the gods of heaven, welcome the dead and, quote, satisfied are Set and Neat. Perhaps they even form a couple because of their belligerent side. It is for his warlike aspect that, on occasion, kings will pride themselves as the sons of Set. I'll read the rest of it to you, but then we'll go back to what we just said here. We have seen in the coffin text the protective role played by Neat. Most often she appears to deliver the dead from, quote, the mighty wickedness of Set. In the same text, Set is part of the 7 words of Mehetoret, the primeval cow, the great flood, with whom Neith is identified. The first word of the primeval cow created the bull Set. The revolt of this bull at the moment of the birth of the world would bring disorder, but the animal is controlled thanks to Neith. And then it goes on to talk about, in the New Kingdom on the Chapel of Tutankhamun, we have seen the 4 protective divinities of the dead, represented kneeling on the sign Nub, which is for gold, are victorious over Set. Several times we have spoken of the long feud between Set and Horus, and that Neith agreed with her son, Horus. Of course, Set deploys all his fury against Osiris and everything related to that god of Sais, because in some texts Osiris is linked with the town of Sais, and Neith is referred to as his mother. And this is why, in a ritual against the conspiracies of Set, one says of him, there are testimonies against him in the Sate Nome. It says, but Osiris is always assured victory thanks to the protection of Neith, who shoots down their enemies. And recall here a passage from the ritual protection of Osiris, in which the brutal intervention of Neith and the other goddesses against Set surrounds Osiris. So basically, he mentions that the fact that Set and Neith are paired in a reference in the pyramid texts, and he says, perhaps, peut-être in French, they were a couple. But he doesn't say unequivocally, yes, they were, linked as consorts. They could also have been associated for some other reason. Remember, Neith and Upwot, aka Wepwawet, the opener of the ways, had a similar function, but they weren't necessarily seen as a couple. Same thing here. So, what you basically have is one source suggests an idea, then someone else reads that and takes it as fact, and then reports it as such without noticing the qualifiers in it. So, that's why it pays to go track down original sources when you can get them. Now, I will be doing another Kemetic how-to episode, and we will talk about Egyptian funerals and the afterlife. This is something that has been requested a few times before, so I'm finally getting to that. And it'll actually be fun, even though we'll be talking about funerals. We'll put the fun back in funeral. That's coming up next time. In the meantime, I know I'm getting more questions. Keep giving them. Keep tuning in. When it comes to the broadcasts, which we usually do on a Friday night, officially it was supposed to be at 7:30 p.m. Central Time, Central U.S. time, but it's kind of drifted more towards 8:30 just because entropy. Things happen. I've had everything from having to, oversleeping and having to take care of my husband and I one night to, I got attacked by wasps, the other night, and, so it's just weird things happen. But, stay tuned, and, like I said, usually on Friday nights is when we do it, but we're in the middle of, the days on the year, so we're doing a little something every night, to honor the 5 children of Nut. So, happy Egyptian New Year early to everyone. I will be seeing you online soon in some form or another. And in the meantime, Senepti.
Do you have a question about Egyptian paganism? Share it in the comments section, and it could be the topic of the next Kemetic Byte. Don't forget to subscribe, and join me on Patreon for more videos, outtakes, and exclusives.